There is so much terrible wedding planning advice out there that I actually had to split this into 2 videos. Hello, beautiful brides, and welcome back. If you haven't seen part 1 of this video, that's totally fine. I will link it at the end of this one so you can just go back and watch that. I was saying in the first video that there's all of these traditions and etiquette and stuff you have to do because it's the way that it's always been done. This kind of being force-fed to us, and a lot of times it can stress you out and it can stress your budget, and it's just doesn't make sense. A lot of this stuff is just like old, outdated advice, and there are much better ways to do things now. So I definitely think that we can let go of a lot of these really bad pieces of advice just to save ourselves a little bit of time and a little bit of money and maybe even a little bit of stress. So if that sounds good to you and you're ready to make some new traditions and actually have a beautiful, meaningful wedding, give this video a thumbs up and let's dive right into the rest of my terrible wedding planning advice that you should not take, and I'll share some ideas with you as well for alternatives. Really quick before we get into that video, I wanted to let you girls know that I am now accepting applications for the Unveiled Bride Society for our 2021 featured brides. I am personally handpicking 12 brides to plan their 2021 weddings with me. We'll have weekly virtual coffee dates with me and the other Bride Society members where we'll walk through the entire planning process together. I'll be there to brainstorm with you, answer all of your planning questions, and to help you really create your dream day. Your planning process and your wedding will be featured here on my channel to help and inspire thousands of other brides throughout their planning processes. If you're interested, you can apply at the link below. My 2022 session isn't open for applications yet, but you can join the interest list so that you are the first to know when I start accepting applications for that. That's all going to be at the link below. Also, be sure to join my private bride-to-bride Facebook group, the Bride Tribe, so that you can all bounce ideas off each other and help each other out throughout your planning process. I will link that below as well. Now let's get into the video. So there is a piece of wedding planning advice that kind of goes unspoken, but I think there's so much pressure around it, and it's that everything has to be Pinterest perfect. Don't get me wrong, I am obsessed with Pinterest and I love scrolling through the beautiful ideas on there, but most of that stuff is not realistic for most brides. A lot of the images that you're seeing on these beautiful wedding blogs are staged, so they get the stuff for free from the vendors who are involved. And if you were to apply that look to your entire wedding, it would cost you a lot. So we need to remember that Instagram and Pinterest are a highlight reel and they're great for inspiration and ideas, but definitely do not compare your wedding to what you're seeing on there because that is just not real life. One of my favorite wedding planning hacks is to take one of those beautiful tablescapes that you see on Pinterest and Instagram and apply that to your sweetheart table or to your head tables. And then the rest of your tables can be much more simple. This is a realistic way of achieving those beautiful blog Pinterest perfect looks without completely blowing your budget. My next bad piece of wedding advice kind of came along with the whole Pinterest era as well, and that is that you can DIY everything for cheaper than you can buy it. That is not true. A lot of these projects actually end up costing you the same as if you were just to purchase something or if you were to purchase it used from another bride. So a lot of these DIY projects aren't actually worth doing, especially if you don't have time and you're not into it. Don't stress yourself out about DIYing everything. I have an entire video on things that you should not DIY that I will link below, but be sure that you're actually comparing the cost of buying something new or used to actually DIYing it before you just try to DIY everything. because DIY projects always end up taking more time and energy than you imagined, and I love DIY for weddings and personalizing and stuff, but you should really focus on just 1 or 2 projects. The next piece of bad wedding planning advice usually comes from wedding planners themselves because business, but that is that you can't do it without a wedding planner. I say it time and time again on this channel, you can definitely plan your own wedding. With all of the free resources out there, there's just so much online, you can totally figure out how to plan everything, but I always recommend hiring a day of coordinator. I have an entire video on this that I will link below as well, but yeah, that's just not true that you can't plan it yourself. With all of the resources available to you online, it's definitely possible for anyone to plan their own wedding. The next piece of bad wedding advice that you should definitely not follow is that if you are in or invited to someone's wedding, they have to be in or invited to your wedding. That is not the case. I have an entire video on who should be invited and who should be in your bridal party, and you never want to invite someone just because you were invited to their wedding. I think it is so important to only invite people to your wedding that you really want there, who are going to really contribute to your experience. The next bad piece of wedding advice that you should definitely cut out, and it might actually save you some money, is you need so much paper. Pinterest and wedding blogs kind of make us think we need these like 12-piece wedding invitations, and you need menus and programs and all of this stuff to make your wedding beautiful, and that is just not the case. I think a lot of this stuff is more hassle than it's worth, especially if you're trying to DIY all of it. And there's just a lot of things that you can replace with just one sign. Put effort into one sign for like your program or your menu or whatever, and call it a day. Don't print hundreds of little cards and programs and all this stuff, because they actually don't get the appreciation from guests really. Like, guests don't really notice these details as much. And they're kind of just a waste of time and a waste of money. And same goes for escort cards too. Especially if you don't have specific assigned seating and people are just assigned to tables, just stick with a sign. Don't waste your time making escort cards and then having to have them put out and having them blow away in the wind and all this stuff. All this stuff is just a bigger hassle than it's worth if you aren't into it or if you don't have the budget for it. Another terrible piece of wedding advice that I see a lot is that you are responsible for your out-of-town guests the entire time that they're here. I'm not saying like you need to ignore them or anything, but you just have so much going on leading up to the wedding that it can be extremely overwhelming if you're trying to play hostess to all of your out-of-town guests as well. I think it's important to spend time with them, and that's why you can invite them to your rehearsal dinner and maybe have an activity or a brunch or something too. But for the most part, I think that people are adults and it's totally fine to let them be on their own and explore on their own. If you do want to like add to their trip and make it a little bit more inclusive or something, you could plan some activities in advance and just kind of give them a flyer and have them all coordinate what they want to do. But don't stress yourself out too much trying to play hostess when you're trying to get ready for your wedding. The more stuff that you add on your plate, the less present you'll be able to be, and the less you'll enjoy the experience. And the last piece of bad wedding advice that I've been seeing a lot is that you need a videographer. For me, I think that it's way more important to have a really great photographer than it is to try to split your budget between a photographer and videographer if you just don't have a big enough budget to make it work. I think photographers can totally capture the memories and the moments that need to be captured, and you can go back and revisit those. And I think that people go back and look at photos a lot more than they do like watch their wedding video. If your budget allows for it, I think it's totally fine to hire a videographer, and it can be pretty cool. But don't stress yourself out trying to stretch your budget to get both. There's nothing worse than splitting your budget and then having bad photos and a bad video and just not having any good stuff from your wedding. Don't do that. So if your budget does not allow for it, it's totally fine and it's not gonna be a big deal at all. if you let go of hiring a videographer. Please give this video a thumbs up if it was helpful. I hope that it helped de-stress you a little bit, help you kind of let go of all the advice that's coming at you all at once. And comment below with any of the bad advice that you've received or any questionable advice that you've received as well, and we'll try to help you out there. I post new wedding planning inspiration and motivation and ideas every single week, so be sure that you're subscribed so you don't miss that, and we'll see you next time. Happy planning!